Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. We are going to talk about how you can become published and, your own book, but it doesn't necessarily have to be what you might be thinking in terms of a book. Now, we've talked before about many of the titles that this gentleman has helped people publish, all different types of book, fiction, nonfiction, something very different today, and a book that has inspired, given insight, and helped others in a journey. And we're going to dig into that book today. Mark Pogodzinski is the gentleman behind NFB Publishing. He's back with us. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Really good, really good. And once again, you bring with us a wonderful guest that you've worked with. Who do we have here today?
So this is Jennifer Liberatori, who wrote an incredibly powerful book, a memoir, and a little bit more than a memoir, because I think it goes into different genres. And it's about her son and his struggles with OCD and addiction. And she produced just a beautiful memoir in honor of him, and has used that to create a foundation and help so many other people.
Welcome, Jennifer. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Before we got on here, I shared with both of you, I was aware of this book, and I didn't even know you were going to be with us today. And when I saw the title of the book and the cover, it just re-resonated with me. This was a journey that you were on. You're going to tell it better than I, so please do.
Okay, sure. So I have 4 sons. My oldest son, Zach, struggled. He had the onset of his OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, at 16, so severe, debilitating OCD. He also struggled with bulimia. We had, of course, attempted to get him the help he needed for many, many years. So it was almost a decade. And he was always very willing to get, counseling. He had psychologists and psychiatrists. He did inpatient stays. However, he eventually, a lot of those things really didn't help him, unfortunately. So eventually he turned to a painkiller, an opioid, which is what eventually took his life, which I know was an accidental overdose. I just felt immediately that I needed to write his story after he died. I ran into a very kind dad that I knew, who knew how Zach had died. And he said to me, what happened? Did he just fall into the wrong crowd? And I almost didn't even know how to respond to that. But he's very fortunate that he doesn't have, mental illness and addiction in his life. And I guess I was shocked that there was anyone who didn't. So I felt like it was really important to share this story, to tell the story of Zach. Also, he was incredibly an advocate for breaking the stigma of mental illness. He, even back in as early as 2015, when really people weren't talking about it that much, certainly celebrities hadn't, started, like Selena Gomez, talking about mental illness. And he was just always posting on social media and reaching out. He wanted people who were struggling to know they weren't alone, to get the help they needed and not be ashamed. And he was very much about breaking the stigma of mental illness. And I knew by writing this book, I hoped that it would help to do that. Just, with his picture on the front and telling his story. He wasn't a boy who didn't have, parents in his life or didn't have opportunities. He had a family that loved him in all the opportunities. And still, this can happen to any family. So I thought it was important to share that. And then, of course, just as importantly, I tell my story of healing after he died. It's just incredible grief and sadness and trauma that a lot of people out there go through. And I had really helpful teachers and tools that I used. And so I felt that it was really important that I share that too, to hopefully Zach and I both just want to help someone. Even if we helped one person, then we did our job.
This book offers so much, bringing to light mental challenges. And fortunately, we can say mental health nowadays, and people are okay with it, to say, yeah, I'm going to go see my therapist. Oh, it's like seeing a friend now. But again, if we went back 20 years, 30, my gosh, you can't even say those two words, mental health. It brings that to light. It brings different challenges that teens have, as well as adults, but even more so, it's more of a challenge for teens. The healing process, walking that journey with him, all of that. How did you decide what to include in the book? Because it gets very personal.
It's interesting. I have to say I didn't give it much thought. In retrospect, maybe I should have done a writing course or something like that. But I think I just knew. I always knew that I would write a book someday. I truly believe that Zach helped me write this book. And I literally sat down at my kitchen table and just started writing our story, almost as if I was, talking to a friend, and just in pure honesty. Like you said, I really, maybe if I knew that so many people would read it, I would not have been so honest, but I feel like that was really important. And I just kind of knew in the beginning, like I just outlined, and, I wanted to talk about Zach's, how he was such a wonderful boy, and then, all of his struggles, and then just what happened after that. And so it kind of flowed, and took on a life of its own.
Mark, from the writing aspect of this book, what were your initial thoughts when Jennifer presented it to you, and how did the whole process go? This is very different than, and I don't want to say you're typical, but other books that could be fiction and nonfiction. This is a memoir, but it's also a story that's being told within there. How did that all go for you initially?
I think she hit it right on the head there. The book is honest. And when I was publishing it and like looking through it and trying to edit a little bit, the honesty had to remain. That was the cornerstone of the entire story. And it does read like she's talking directly to the audience. Like you're sitting across from her, and she's telling you this story. And I thought that's what gave it the most power. And again, the subject matter of a teenage boy going through such mental difficulties, it had to be written the way it was. And then the duality of the survivor story and how you deal with the loss of a child like that. I thought that was the most powerful aspect. And I think she was right when honesty was the most important thing. And it comes across like that. Sometimes brutally, sometimes beautifully, but never in a false way.
Tell us about your son. My understanding, looking at the book, honor student, like you said, had everything going there. OCD, many of us have it. But then things started changing a little bit. Can you just walk us through that journey?
Yeah, I always say he was a wonderful boy, truly. I have 4 sons. Of course, I think they're all wonderful. Zach was one of those kids that everyone loved. Truly, he was just kind of quiet, but had this just glow about him. He was kind and he was compassionate, caring about other people. And yes, he was highly intelligent. School always came very easily to him. He always got good grades. He was an excellent athlete. He did Little Loop and Little League, and then he ended up actually being a quarterback for his varsity football team, Canisius High School in Buffalo. So he had these little tendencies when he was a kid that, I kind of tendencies that I have. I always say I would call it my OCD. I would not ever say that now. But neat and clean tendencies are the way things had to be organized. And, we just kind of thought it was idiosyncrasies. When he was 16, it just completely changed. And I got a text from him saying, I think I have OCD. And Zach was always very adamant about people not using the term OCD correctly. A lot of people say I have OCD, but it's not OCD.
It's so true. I just want to interject in here. It's thrown around. It's thrown around. Like I've checked on my keys again. I got to make sure that I'm OCD. No, you haven't been diagnosed. Stop. Don't do that.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that I hope that people get when they read this book is that they don't say that anymore. I've had people say that to me. Like, I used to say, oh, my OCD, and I would never say that anymore. And at one point, Zach wrote an essay talking about his OCD, and I don't even have the words.
Wow.
It's so powerful that everyone who reads it is like, wow, I had no idea. It's just so enlightening. So I published that whole essay, in the book. I felt it was important that it was completely in there. So yeah, when he told us it literally, it can come on like that. It was onset of puberty. And it was a nightmare. He was very soon suicidal. And we, of course, tried to get him the help. He spent 2 weeks at ECMC psychiatric unit when he was 17. And I always say that's when our nightmare began. It was many years. He had excellent help. He went to the Oshai Children's Hospital psychiatric clinic. He had an excellent psychologist who helped him, and he just put on medication. Somehow it just wasn't ever enough for him. He always struggled. He tried to manage it. He then developed bulimia, which is an eating disorder. Struggled with depression, then turned to, as I said, Opana, an opioid, sometimes drinking. However, he never gave up. I always say that he was the strongest person that I know. I can't imagine what that's like, going through all of that and then continuing to go to these inpatients and outpatients and counseling. And he went to 6 inpatient facilities over the years. So I know that sometimes he just did that for us, to just kind of plug away at it. However, I just think he was, very, very brave and strong to do that, and very courageous to talk about his struggles and share his story, not caring, if people made fun of him. He didn't care if that happened or if he got bullied.
That's unique.
It is unique. Yeah. And I think I said to a friend, maybe it was easier for him because he was very popular. He was the quarterback and blah, blah, blah. And she said, actually, I think it would be harder because look what he had to lose. Look what people really admired him and liked him. And by putting that out there, they would maybe, think less of him or ridicule him, which of course is not what should happen. But let's face it, sometimes it does, especially 10 years ago. So that's, basically his story. He overdosed a year before he died, and lived, and then went away to several other inpatient facilities. He was actually all the way across the country in Tucson and then California. And then when he came back, COVID hit. And so it was kind of the perfect storm, all that he went through, and then COVID. And he was still, though, willing to get help. He had just gotten into an incredible OCD treatment facility that takes many months to get into. And he died the next day. He overdosed that night and spent a couple days at Mercy Hospital.
He gets much credit for following through and trying to, whether he was pacifying you guys or trying to get help, he was still doing it. So many teens fight it. I'm like, oh, that's not happening. He made the attempt, but yeah, to your point, you see it as he's got all this over here, but he's dealing with some challenges over here, but then may feel that he has to live up to a lot of successes and things that he achieved over here. And, just what a struggle. And yes, I wanted to mention the COVID situation. I saw the date, October 2020 when he passed. And that alone, that year from March on is a lot of stress for all of us. Now you add everything else going on. Wow. Yeah. Tell me about the texts. You included some text.
Texts from Zach over the years. It's really interesting because a friend asked me how did you write this book? How do you possibly remember all that stuff? And it is interesting, maybe partly because, his dad and I are divorced, that when he was at his dad's house, he would always reach out to me, but he didn't like talking. He would do it in text.
He's a teen.
He's a teen. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Let's face it. Most teens, especially, males, tend to be like
100%. I mean, I loathe Snapchat, and my daughter, who is 16, and she lives with me. That's the way we communicate. And I got to follow it. Unless it's really important, then it comes as a text, but that's how they communicate. Yeah.
Exactly. And we had a very close relationship. So he did always reach out to me. His one counselor suggested we write to each other in a notebook, which we did for many years. And then it kind of switched over to text when text started coming into play. And then also we had a group text with him and myself and his dad, which was separate, talking about different events. So that was really how we followed how he was doing. It was how I was able to put together the book and the story, because I thought I remembered everything, but then I could literally follow a chain of texts, to go over every single thing that happened. Because whenever he was really doing badly, he would say, I'm not doing good. It's what he would say, which meant he was pretty much suicidal. So thank God he, reached out to me so many times over the course of 8 years. And I guess that's, a blessing in disguise that I had these texts to put his story together.
How did you write this book? The whole process? You're not a professional writer, as I understand it. You had a story that needed to be told. How did that all work? I can't even imagine where even to begin.
And I did have all of my writing teachers ever always told me that I should go into writing. So including high school, including college, but I thought, well, how do you do that? Like, what do you do? How do you make money doing that? Just sit down and write a book. But I just always knew, like, someday I'm going to write a book about something, because I always loved the writing. And then obviously, when Zach died, this was it. I always thought that Zach and I would write a book together. I thought that he would get better. He was a beautiful writer. And I thought, we're going to write a book together to help people. And so it just seemed obvious, that I would do it alone. And so I can't even give you a good explanation. I literally sat down.
It just flowed. It just flowed out.
It did. Yeah. I lightly mapped it out. Like, okay, I know I want to do a quotation here and here and here and here. And I want to have a part 1 and a part 2 and a part 3. And, that I did map that out. But other than that, I really did just start writing. I write with a pen. I don't use a computer. So I'm literally writing with a pen. And then I would part 1, I would sit down and type it into my computer, and then, of course, edit, like, oh, that's not right. This isn't right. And that's really it. I mean, I probably did the editing like 20 times before I even sent it to Mark. So had a lot of editing, but it just, it was our story. So it wasn't like I had to come up with anything. It was like our story, and then me commenting, on our story as I went along.
It's my belief, and through research, that the best way to write something impactful, intentional, is with your hand, as opposed to typing. It's just a whole different scenario. You type quick, and your thoughts are like, you're not in real time. When you're writing with a pen, it's flowing word by word by word. And, you cross things off, whatever. Mark, what's your take on that? I'd love to know.
I think we mentioned it once before. I'm a big fan of handwriting things. I have notebooks all over the house, and I carry some with me all the time. But like with Jennifer's book there was little parts to it, things that I remember, like the songs that Zach enjoyed. And in those little details, I think more so than many of the memoirs that I have written and edited, really brought it home that this was a living person, that they existed. Sometimes you lose that in a book, especially a memoir. You're reading it, and in your mind, you're hearing your own voice. But with that book, with those little details, and again, with the honesty of the writing, it was something quite different. And you could really picture this young man, the troubles you go through, the family, And then Jennifer's story also, which I think a lot of people forget, as the survivors. How do you deal with the loss of this essential person in your life? Depression can be a paralytic, or in some cases, it can inspire you to do great things. And I thought the way that book was laid out with his story and then the survivor story, it was just a wonderfully written book. And as I said, more so than many of the memoirs that I've read and edited, it came alive. And you could really feel the emotion and love of the people in it.
It's a great description. It came alive. And every time, and I can't stop looking at the cover. And I remember I did the same thing when I first saw the cover months ago. It's come alive. And there's a lot of heartache and grief in this book and the story and the situation. But the cover is more of a celebration.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. And, you know, honestly, I got to tell you, I speak from the heart and I'm transparent. It almost looks like a TV show that I may have seen before. Like could have been, you know, a Disney show or something like that. But it's a real story. And there's so many takeaways from the book.
In the book, there's a distinct sense of joy from time to time that pierces the sadness of it. And I think you get that from the cover, like the look on Zach's face.
100%.
Hope through the sadness. And that's essential for a memoir, for any book. That it has to have some sort of hope aspect to it, or else it's just you're beaten down by the end of it. And I think this one has that. And when you're done with it, obviously you're sad and you understand what these people, the family went through. But it has that part at the end where some good has to come out of this. The foundation, the work that's being done, the fact that he was a popular teenage man, and he was not afraid to talk about what was bothering him. And we see that now in society, more acceptable. But it's still not with that particular group, those teenage men who are going through all these different things. And I think that's why this book, not only sad and joyful, but important to read.
His memory lives on not only in the book, but everything that you've been doing, Jennifer, with foundation, fundraisers, awareness. We're still talking about it and will. And one thing that struck me, you said before, you always wanted to write a book with your son. You did. I
did. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I know some people think I'm a little cuckoo when I say that, but no way. 100%. And I can feel it as I'm saying it. He was totally involved in this process. And I know that he did. And Mark, thank you for saying that the book ends with hope, because so many of my family and my people were like, oh my God, this is so sad. I'm like, but is it too sad? Like, I hope that you have some hope at the end, or that there's joy. Because I maybe have been remiss not saying that about Zach, that yes, there was so much joy in his life, in our lives. You know, we were very blessed. He and his brothers were closer than any four people I know. And I talking about the cover, I think that she captured that. So a woman named Hannah Taylor, who's become a friend, she completely put that together. I gave her a bunch of pictures and she came up with that whole idea. And I agree. Like, I just think it captures, Zach and his story.
Right down to the font.
Yeah, right.
It's all there.
I maybe tweaked one or two things, but for the most part, she completely came up with that, with the film strip, with those beautiful photos that my friend Patty Looney took years ago of the boys. And it just captures their joy and their love for each other.
Yeah. And you feel it. It. You Wonderful Boy is the name of the book. NFBpublishing.com to see that and other titles. And of course, if you've got a story to tell, no matter what it is, Mark is the man. He can walk you through that journey. Both of you, thank you so much for being here today and sharing a story that needed to get told.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Jason Derulo. I love that music connects to people all over the country. But unfortunately, so does something else. Childhood hunger. 15 million kids struggle with hunger right here in America. And yet, every year, billions of pounds of surplus food in the U.S. go to waste instead of going to the children in need. Feeding America is working to change this. The Feeding America nationwide network of food banks rescues this surplus of food to help provide meals to families in virtually every community in the United States, including yours. But they just can't do this alone. Join me in the fight against hunger in America. For more information on what you can do to get involved, visit feedingamerica.org. That's feedingamerica.org. Together we can solve hunger. Together, we're Feeding America. A message from Feeding America and the Ad Council.